All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Village of Homer Glen Committee of the Whole meeting, Tuesday, January 29th. If we'll all stand, we'll have Trustee K. Janis lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Costa?
Present.
Trustee DeVivo? Present. Trustee K. Janis?
Present.
Trustee Nemec? Trustee Sable? Present. Trustee Yukich?
Present.
Mayor Daley?
Present. Okay, tonight's meeting is a committee of the whole meeting. The village board and I will informally discuss the 159th Street Homer Glen Corridor Study Project. Representatives from the village's planning consultant, Hazel Levine, will lead the village board and I through tonight's discussion. There will be no public comment this evening. There will be other opportunities for the public comment during the development of this corridor study project. Also, there will be no official business conducted by the village board this evening. Now I'll turn the meeting over to John Hazel to start tonight's discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, board, thanks for having us out here this evening. My name is John Housfield with Housfield Levine Associates, an urban planning firm with offices in downtown Chicago. And some of you I know well, some of you I don't know. While a principal with another firm, we did the Homer Glen's first ever comprehensive plan. I was principal with Pedigree, Allen, and Payne. I was one of the primary authors of that document and conducted a lot of the outreach and work with the village. Then under my own firm, the firm we have now, we created the Homer Glen Parks and Recreation Master Plan for you as well. So we're thrilled to be working on 159th Street corridor to continue our work with the village. We know it well, and we like working here. We have an agenda that's been passed out, sort of walk you through what we want to cover fairly briefly at the beginning. We want to take a few minutes just before we get into the workshop component. And with the plans underway for 159th Street to be widened, I know there are some access issues, there are some median issues. It's being improved and widened by IDOT, under IDOT jurisdiction. There are limitations as what the village can do and can't do, but we want to make sure that we serve as your advocate and the advocate of the business and property owners along the corridor to make sure that what happens along this corridor and the areas surrounding it to the greatest advantage of Homer Glen's residents, business owners, and property owners. So the timing of the study is important to undertake it. The role of the village board, I know I want to tell you what the role of the elected officials are, but as we need to go through this study, as the mayor indicated, there will be times when we have workshops just for the residents and just for the business community, for them to get feedback like we're going to do tonight. You're going to be serving as a sounding board for this project. We will be able to come to these working groups, committee of the wholes, to kick around ideas and talk about things to sort of keep us on track and make sure we do what we need to be doing, so that when we take ideas and concepts out to the village residents and business owners to comment on, they will have been vetted here to some degree before we go out to the public to get public comment on it. So you really serve as a sounding board for the entire community as we work through this before we take ideas and concepts to the greater community. So you work in that capacity. What I want to do real quickly is go through and just spend a couple of minutes going through the scope of work. You should all have a copy of it. It's already been set. This is what we're going to do, but I want to take you through it fairly quickly so that you understand what we're in for over the course of the next 10 months or so. Before I start, I tend to talk very quickly. I'm one of 9 kids. It's sort of a survival mechanism. If I get going too quickly, just tell me to slow down and repeat myself, and I'll slow down. So I'm just going to go through this very quickly. Director meeting 1A, project initiation, is a meeting we've had with staff. We had that with Cam, with Janie, and other key staff to go over the logistics of the assignment, get GIS data, take a look at some of the requirement needs for mapping. One of the things that came up was, do we have the latest and greatest CAD drawings from IDOT of the corridor? The village did not. We said we would stick our hounds on it. We now have the latest and greatest CAD files directly from IDOT of everything they're proposing for the corridor. We haven't had time to jump into them yet, but we got those secured yesterday. So we have those. Next is 1B, project initiation workshop with the village board. That is this evening. Step 2 is community outreach. As the mayor indicated, there are several things we're doing to make sure you get feedback from everybody. And again, the project has just started. Nothing has been done yet. 2 ways, a workshop with residents, business owners, property owners. It's not the time for the village officials to comment, it's time for everybody else to comment. The date for that has not been set. Once we have the date for that established, we will make sure that the notices go out. Property owners, to the extent possible, are notified, businesses are made aware, so we get as many people to that as possible. That's the first workshop. The date has not yet been set for that. We're going to be developing an interactive project website that will be up and running in the next couple of weeks. On that website, we'll be linking to RSS feed, Twitter, and Facebook for anybody who follows the project on those social networking components. There'll be an online mapping software program established, so from the comfort of your home, you can go on and map in Google Maps and aerial photography issues that you have for different locations along the corridor, and site-specific mapping. You can do that at home. We will get all that information via the website. There are questionnaires there if you're a business owner or a property owner. There's also questionnaires that'll be on there if you're a resident. We'll be doing a detailed market analysis. This is step number 3. If we're going to make recommendations as to what land uses or development may be appropriate in different locations, we have to understand your market. What type of market is strong for different types of uses, and what types of market conditions might be weak or not very supportive for other types of development. So that's not to say what will or won't be developed along the corridor, but we want to get a good sense of what the market looks like it is going to indicate. So that's step 3, there's A, B, and C. So the demographic analysis, a preliminary market analysis of development potential, and then a preliminary recommendations report regarding economic development for the corridor and all the property. Step 4 is an existing conditions and inventory analysis. We look at basically everything we can. Market, all past plans and studies, zoning, signage, and development control. Often when we talk to property owners and business owners, some of the biggest grievances or issues are with zoning and signage. Development regulations, we'll be taking a look at all of those. Existing land use and development. Every issue with regard to transportation and mobility, vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic, bicycle traffic, and again, not only on the corridor, but in all the areas adjacent to and near the corridor. So it's not just the frontage properties. We take a look at the infrastructure and utilities, environmental features and open space, and all of those assessments and reports together with the community outreach and the feedback we've gathered will get pulled into an existing conditions report. So everybody has a pretty honest assessment as to what's going on right now. What's working, what's not working, what we need to address. Step number 5, we'll be developing some preliminary frameworks and some preliminary alternatives for the corridor. It'll get vetted both here and throughout the entire village. Step 6 is where we begin to develop core plans. There are 4 of them. Land use and development, including design guidelines, streetscape and beautification, sign code and development regulations, transportation infrastructure, access and mobility. And I'm sorry, 5 core plans. The last one is the economic development strategy for the entire corridor. Again, all of those core plans will get vetted by the village board and then taken out to the community for comment before any action is taken. Step number 7 is the development of the corridor plan itself, pulling all of these components together into the final document. That'll then go to the village board and then go back out to the public for comment before anything happens. So that's a lot very quickly, but in a nutshell, those are the 7 steps that we're going to be going through over the course of the next 10 months or so. The bottom line is planning process has to do 3 things. You have to assess what you have to work with right now, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever. Honestly, what you've got right now. You've got to figure out based on where you are now, where you want to be in 5, 10 years, 20 years, 1 year. And once you determine where you want to be, you've got to figure out what you're going to do to get there. How are you going to pay for it? Who are you going to partner with? What regulations you put in place? How do you partner with property owners to make it happen? How do you push against IDOT with certain things to get certain things done? But once we determine where we want to go, the plan will articulate with as much detail as possible all the different things we think the village ought to be doing, who they need to be partnering with to make it happen, when to do it, and how to get it paid for. So that's sort of the last piece of the pie. So that is, in a nutshell, and again, very quickly, the process we're going to be going through over the next year or so. And in each one of these steps, we meet with the village board, we meet with the public, we want to make sure we sort of have the blessing on that piece and everybody understands where we are and is okay with it before we move on to the next piece. You don't want to get to a year from now and then just pull out a plan and people say, boy, how did we get here? This is what we thought it should be. So we don't want any surprises. So we do that by making sure we touch base with everybody along the way. So it's a lot fast, I know. I wanted to get this just out there quickly. If anybody has any questions or comments on the scope, the study, why we're doing it, what we're doing, or anything like that before we sort of jump into the the meat of the matter. Any questions or anything? Yeah.
Just quickly, do you have a timeline for the next 10, 11 months of any kind of
Yeah,
dates
we
that
have
you want to
a timeline. We'll get it to Janie and Cam so they can distribute to you. It was in our initial proposal. Tear it off. Yeah, it looks like this, but it shows you all the 7 steps we talked about with all the subsequent tasks in each of the 7 steps. Collectively, there's probably 50 different things we're doing. It tells you roughly over the course of the next year when we will be doing it. And with a symbol that indicates if there's a meeting plan associated with that step or a deliverable plan associated with that step. We'll make sure that in the next couple of days, Janie and Cam get this, and you all get a copy. All right. It's a good question. All right. The main thing we want to do this evening is get the board's feedback regarding the issues that they think are most important for us to address as we start the study. Whenever we do a study, we don't come in like a bull in the china shop and say, hey, we're the experts, here's what you guys ought to be thinking about. The first step with the board and when we start meeting with the public is simply going to be for them to say, listen, here's what you guys need to be made aware of. Here's what we think you need to be looking at. Here's what is most important to us. So when we actually start doing the work, we know what is most important to the community. So this is the first step. This is a chance for the board to let us know before we even get started what it is they think is important for us to begin to look at over the course of the next year. And the next step after meeting with this board will be to set up the community workshop with the businesses, the property owners, and the residents for them to have the exact same opportunity to tell us what they think like you're going to do this evening. So they can tell us what they think is most important, what their priorities are, and what they want to make sure we address to the extent we can during the course of the study. So what I want to do, I'm not going to keep you here beyond probably 11:30, maybe 11:45.
That's early.
Yeah.
An hour and a half. It's more of an orientation to kick this study off correctly. So take one of these and pass it around. It's a brief questionnaire. Don't start filling in. It's like school. Don't start filling it out yet. Keep your pencils down or your pens. Don't start filling in anything until I sort of give you instructions. So.
John, wait 1 second. Can you hear John on the tape? Can you hear John?
I hear him.
Okay.
We need this.
Yeah, because we want to be able to put it up on the website so people can. Yeah. No, we'll get you a stand. All right. Very good.
As long as you can.
This might be too small. Change out. Maybe if it's too small, we'll spread this one.
We'll be okay.
Thank you.
All right, so everybody should have one of these questionnaires. And again, we do this for a couple of reasons. One, as I said at the beginning, the village board is sort of serving as a committee providing oversight on this study. And in order to make sure that we're getting good guidance and direction, we like to know if the group that's giving us guidance and direction is in sync with a lot of what we're hearing out in the public. So we ask similar questions whenever we meet with the public. So what I want you to do is, we're going to be collecting these. You don't have to write your names on them, but we will be collecting them, so write as legibly as you can. And I want you to take a few minutes and answer question number 1. And question number 1 says, identify three issues or concerns regarding the 159th Street corridor in Homer Glen. So they can be very, very specific, they can be very general, but I want you to identify what you think are the five of the most important issues facing this corridor and this village regarding the corridor as we start the study. So take a few minutes and write down 5 things to question number 1. Don't go on to answer questions 2, 3, or 4. All right? And you can write as much as you want, but brevity is appreciated. Oh, we will.
Don't you have that little music that plays?
You know, I should. Nick can hum for you if you And this is Nick Davis. I should have introduced him. He's an associate with our firm. Nick will be working hand in hand on this. I think a lot of you know Devin Levine. He's my business partner of Houseel Levine. He will be working on this extensively. He's finishing up a plan this evening in St. Charles at a public hearing, so he couldn't be here this evening. But he'll be working on this. While the board members are writing this down, I'm just going to ask a quick question. I know this is a working session with the board. How many people in the audience own a business on 159th Street? How about don't own a business, but maybe you own property on 159th? All right, good. We'll be talking with you guys throughout the process, so I'm glad you guys are here. Most of you look like you're done. Some of you are still writing, so we'll give you one more minute. I'm going to be putting you on the spot, so make sure you have 5 things written.
We follow directions and it
says
says 3.
It says
Up.
3.
3 is perfect.
I put 4 just in case.
So did I, just in case.
All right, what I want to do now is I'm going to go around the table, and when I get to you, I want you to give me one of the things you wrote down. And Nick's going to write them down on the board. And we'll abbreviate. The board is more like just notes for us. So you'll abbreviate, but we want to get the gist of what it was you've said. And as we go around the room, give me one of the things you wrote down. And if I call on you, like I call on, let's say I call on Trustee Sandal, and she's got something written down, but one of the 2 people before her, I've already said it. Don't say something somebody else has already said. So if somebody says, I have an issue with the idea of landscape medians, and somebody else has already said that, and it's on your list, don't say it. I only want to hear things that haven't been said yet. The idea is we want to generate a cumulative list of issues, writing down. Later, we'll be able to identify which ones you think are most important, or if everybody put that down, when we collect your papers, we will know everybody wrote that down. But the first time around, I just want you to say, and if we get to you, like if we get to the mayor, and Mayor Daley says, boy, all 3 of mine are already up on the board, then we just go to the next person. So we're going to start over here with Trustee Ted, because I don't know if I can pronounce your last name.
That's fine, thank you.
So one thing that you wrote down for question 1.
Okay, one of the things that as we move forward with the strategy, or your organization does, and have communications on that, is what I'd be interested in hearing on identifying some of the interrelated elements that are conjunct to our community and as it relates on the east-west of 159th. We know that Orland Park has a 159th Street study going on, or has had it completed, and they are well aware of what our community is about. So how do we, as a community on 159th Street in Homer Glen, interrelate to these elements that are going to be the travel path of 159th to draw the customers to our...
Very good. So the interrelatedness of the corridor as it passes through Homer Glen with everything that's going on around it.
Correct.
Very good. And that's the unique thing. We do a lot of corridor assignments, and that's the unique thing about a corridor. Comprehensive plan is community-wide. Downtown plan is very specific. It has a function. Corridors are unique in that they serve 2 primary functions. One is a regional function. Corridors are in place to move traffic. And the bigger the corridor, the arterial or whatever, the more intensely used it is to move traffic through an area. That's a regional function. The other function is a local function, and that is it has a sense of place, it has to attractively accommodate development, it has to work for the local businesses and property owners, so it has to work for the location it's in as well. So, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive things. It needs to be able to do both. Too often corridors just serve the through traffic and doesn't do a good job of serving the people along the corridor within the community. So those are the 2 functions we have to balance, but phrasing it that way is very good. All right?
Mine is simple, the length of the medians.
Very good, the length of the medians. A lot of businesses are developed for right in, right out. And if you have to take a left to get into a property, that's a challenge for the people whose property you have to take a left into. And we did work in Palos Heights on Harlem Avenue. And years ago, they had medians, they ripped them all out. And every once in a while, someone will say, we need medians along Harlem Avenue, and they'll say, you should have been around 30 years ago when we tore them all out.
We just did Route 30, and it's completely different than what they're saying they're gonna do here.
Yep. So we, like I said, we just got the new engineering drawings from IDOT. We'll look and see exactly what they have. We haven't looked at them yet. We just got them yesterday or today. So the length of the medians, very good. Margaret?
Okay. Well, I know somebody's going to address the concern of the residents and, is this on? And access. So I won't do that. I'll do something that's more related to my chairmanship with the environment, and that is lighting. Although I put planning for to allow businesses the best opportunities to be, it was really number one. So I'm going to address lighting. I didn't see anything about addressing lighting in your the handout that you gave to us tonight. Not to overlight. Not to put unneeded light. I mean, I don't think the residents, property owners would like that we're paying a high amount of costs for electric bills and lighting places that don't need to be lit,
Okay.
that maybe developers can light. So placing them, lighting at intersections, like other towns do, development entrances, and that these lights in these matters follow our ordinances,
Okay.
fully shielded. I don't see any lighting that government is putting in now that has the drop lens where the light goes below the cover or the shield. And that it simulates daylight. So we know it's 3,300 Kelvin or less, and it's not a blue light. And so basically that's it. Although we have amount of budget for lighting, I don't think we need to spend it all, because what we spend we have to pay back.
Okay, that's right. So she's talking about lighting in all of its different aspects. This thing doesn't need to be lit up so you can land the space shuttle on it. It's going
Well,
through
and I don't want it to look like the Las Vegas Strip of
exactly. Well,
lighting.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, and it's going through an area that, in a community that has a very rural and established character, that is part of how a lot of people think of Homer Glen, especially the people who live here, and it also has to function to service the businesses that are there. So lighting is going to be crucial. Has anybody ever been up to Deer Park? It's a big lifestyle center up near 53 and Lake Cook Road. Really intensely developed, probably 500,000 square feet of retail. But if you're across the street, there's a shopping center across the street, the lighting from there, this whole sky is lit up, it's horrible. But if you go across the street and look over the Deer Park Lifestyle Center, you look right up above the light centers and the sky is pitch black. I mean, there's no illumination of the night sky. They've really done a phenomenal job. So it can be done, but you got to sort of plan for it. So that's a good point. Village Clerk.
I'm going to pass to Cameron because I am trying to keep up with what is going on, and I didn't fill out my sheet.
Yeah.
Later, right?
I can fill it out later.
Okay. Traffic and speed control during and after the improvement project.
Okay. Traffic and speed control during and after the project. Mayor?
Okay, I think a couple people have sort of touched on it a little bit, but I think the number one thing that most of these people are here for is access,
Yeah.
access to their properties. Our conversations with the state have been very limited as far as what they're willing to offer for full access to different properties. And now that you have the master plan that you just got either today or yesterday, I'd be very curious to see if there's been any changing with more access, access.
Right. So direct property access, very good. Janie?
I'm going to add to the list the overhead utilities,
Okay.
which are unsightly but expensive to underground. It's a real issue, a real planning issue.
Yeah, it's one of those things that everybody would like to see them underground because they don't go down in storms and everything else. But it's expensive to bury. They're really expensive to bury. And it's funny with regard to the issue of access in a lot of these things. When we work in communities, traffic-related issues are among the most important issues ever identified in a community. And they're often the last issues ever addressed. And people say, if it's the most important issue, how come they never get addressed? And the reason really is twofold. One, they're multi-jurisdictional issues. This is an IDOT jurisdiction. So there's limitations as to what the village can choose to do and work with IDOT to try to get some things done. So it's out of the direct control of the village. And the other thing is the cost. Some things when it comes to transportation infrastructure just cost so much money that it takes years to put in place or to see realized. So even though issues are easily identified, they're not always easily resolved. And we're going to try to fix some of that.
I guess pedestrian access, foot traffic.
Very good. Pedestrian access or foot traffic.
Well, I'm kind of torn between, well, sewer and water is an issue. We need to have that to build anything in the area, but I also had the unmountable medians. Yeah, I know it's such an issue, and I just don't understand how they're going to install those and still
Okay.
provide.
Well, let's put sewer and infrastructure on there, and we'll just, we've got the medians already up there, so. Post-it notes are the best invention ever. We came up with them, they're great.
Well, some of mine are what everybody said, but for me, it's planning, the character, something from Homer Glen, not only on the new development, but how it's going to fit with existing businesses there.
Very good, very good. So the character of the corridor after the improvements are made and development takes place, very good. And if you remember back when the plan ultimately when it's developed will be comprised of several core components. One of those core components is the character of the corridor, focusing just on that. Whether it's the development, the gateways, the lighting, whatever. But a chapter of the plan, a portion of the plan will be devoted just to the corridor character. So that's pretty good.
The IDOT expansion and the takings effect on some of the existing businesses and especially their signage and their parking and things like that.
Everything, very good. So the impact of the IDOT widening on existing businesses, and example cited for signage and parking. All right, we're going to go back around. If you have any other ones we haven't heard, anybody say yet, let's hear them.
Landscaping. The landscaping.
Well, Ted, did you have anything that you wanted to?
Yeah, I did, but
Mark,
if you'd like to carry on with your thoughts there.
Landscaping or
No,
streetscaping?
it's simple, just things that we do need to look at.
Yep.
Because we have to figure out if we're gonna put cement on the top. And then it goes back to what you said before, for the mountable medians that are screwing up the business.
Yep.
And if you go cement, you're gonna have to fix it, everyone's ripping it out. If you do the landscaping, who's gonna pay for it to maintain it?
Yep.
I mean, it's a very expensive thing that we're looking at, and that's something that I think needs to be addressed because the village is paying for it.
Yep.
Well, the taxpayers are paying for it.
And if you put that stuff in, snow is not removed in a delicate fashion along arterial roads. So landscaping that goes in next to it can be, it has to be pretty tolerant because it gets beat up pretty bad. The snow, the impact of salt and everything else, so you're exactly right. Installation is one aspect of it, long-term maintenance is another issue. Yep.
I think we touched on it a little bit, or Cameron did, with the speed issues on construction and post-construction. But I would like to see us, as we move forward, to fully engage with our emergency management services out here in Homer Glen and Homer Township for that matter, to ensure that their thoughts are well heard, their concerns.
So make sure we work with the emergency response personnel to make sure, in the township and the village, to make sure as the corridor is improved or changed, meets their needs or their needs are met.
Yes.
Yep.
Several times at the public section of our agenda, a resident has said that they're concerned about safety. So, my question has been, their concern is that the paths on one or both sides of the street, how safe is a pedestrian going to be? And then also another issue relative to safety is the speed. And, what is a safe speed when you have, at any rate, but in considering also the pedestrian paths?
It's So her concerns are safety with regard to speed of traffic and pedestrian and bicycle activity within the corridor area. Good.
I don't,
Sure, go ahead.
my other one has to do with, when we discuss landscaping, we're also discussing, and this really addresses maintenance, but how do you water? I mean, only so many, to get these plants started, these trees started, you have to water, especially the trees, the first couple of years. And also, if you seed or if it's plantings, regular plantings, they still have to be watered. So how is this done in a cost-effective way without putting a watering truck out there?
Yeah,
you know?
and to me, that's part of maintenance, is the watering of the trees over time. And we hear all the time, people say, there's nothing worse than driving down a street and not seeing any trees, or not seeing any planters, or not seeing any bushes, or not seeing any fountains. And I go, well, there is something that's way worse. And that's driving down a street where they put all that stuff in 10 years ago, and no one has taken care of it, because it shows neglect. And that's worse than it not being there at all. To see planters where everything is dead or busted up, fountains or signage that is broken up or not working, landscaped areas that are not maintained over time, that's far worse than them not being there at all. So the maintenance issue, including watering, is to me huge. It's critical. And there's definitely a cost involved in doing that. And when IDOT comes through, they typically have a template of things that they install that meets their minimum standards. To go over and above that, the municipality typically has to pay for. And so that's an issue. Balancing that's an issue. Dan?
Well, I mean, one of the big parts of your study matches one of the primary concerns, which is 159th Street is going to be our major commercial corridor. The village pays for 56% of its expenditures through sales tax. So one of the big issues facing the corridor is finding a way to maximize the financial viability of the corridor to help continue to pay for the village's operations, so that we do not have to have a property tax.
Very good.
So this is the number one corridor. It has to produce money to support village operations.
Maintaining the corridor is the economic engine for the village. Right. Exactly right. And in a manner that doesn't cannibalize from other areas of the village. If people are simply leaving from where they are in one place of the village to move to this corridor in another place of the village, that's not what we're necessarily looking to do. But that's well stated. Mayor?
To me, in dealing with IDOT, I've been to IDOT's headquarters, they've been here, they've done presentations. To get a good working knowledge of the latitude that we have to working with this project, we see, as different trustees have mentioned, certain types of installation happening in one neck of the woods. Then over here, they're saying it has to be one way. Then you go to another location, it's a different way. I'm not sure that there is a set of rules. It seems as though I'd like to know the latitude of what we can work with here. I know the concerns of the residents, with access and taking of property and this and that and the next thing, but we keep hearing from IDOT that they have this certain set of rules. But when I open my eyes up and I look at, as George mentioned, Route 30, or you look at, you go over Norland Park where all the car dealerships are, there's no median. They pull right up in the center. So how does that apply if, they're telling us one thing, but we're seeing a different thing?
So we need to understand the latitude, the amount of flexibility we have in what IDOT has put forward so far.
Correct.
And their standards. Good.
Correct.
We've noticed in reviewing it just preliminarily with staff, at some locations where the right-of-way alignment is seems to make sense, but in other areas it seems to extend on one side or the other to a point where additional properties are being targeted for acquisition or have been acquired. We don't really understand why it is that way based on grade and other components. So we need to sort of take a look at, again, a consistent application throughout the entire length of the corridor. That's good. Janie?
This corridor and the improvements that are going to happen there are going to hopefully increase the attractiveness of this area for economic development. So to what extent is the village development approval process ready and capable and streamlined enough to be efficient and handle perhaps some activity? And do we need to take a look at our process?
That's an excellent point. It's often easy to point to the stuff that you see or the flashy stuff, and those things are important too, but if you have a process for approval, review and consideration that is overly arduous, not business friendly, not conducive to flexible or creative or contemporary development, you might not know that you have a difficult process, but if you indeed do, you're not going to get what you want out of that process. So that's an excellent point. And as part of this, we're going to be looking at the regulatory and development regulation side of this. Part of that analysis isn't just the regs that govern how and the physicality of things coming out of the ground, but the process by which that gets approved. But that's an excellent point. That's very, very important.
And I guess kind of going on that, the long-term planning for areas that may not be getting developed now within 5 years, but maybe 10, 15 years down the road.
Very good.
That kind of goes with the issue of the zoning, compatible zoning. It's just the zoning is all over the place along 159. We also have a lot of areas that still need to be annexed.
Yeah,
So,
good point.
yeah.
And we'll be looking at those sort of procedures, the annexation procedures and zoning. It's important to note, the philosophy that we approach this with is zoning is not planning. And people think it is, and it's not. Zoning is a tool that helps you, a community, effectively, hopefully, achieve what it wants to achieve. And is in a manner that is fair and equitable to business so they can thrive in the zoning environment. But you need to determine what you want for an area first. And when you've determined what you want, you change the zoning to help get it. But you shouldn't hamstring your planning efforts because a certain zoning happens to be a certain way. If everybody agrees what you're trying to achieve is counter to the existing zoning, get your plan established, get consensus for it, articulate the rationale as to why the plan is the way it is, and then say, in order for this to ever happen, we have to change the zoning. Then set about what you can do with regard to that, keeping in mind property rights, business, and everything else. But the planning has to come first. Then you examine what zoning is. We've got a component of this that will examine the zoning side of all of this. So.
If I may ask one question, are you then suggesting that a total review of the comprehensive plan?
I think we need to take a look at the corridor portion of the comprehensive plan. When you do a comprehensive plan, you're looking at an entire community. And you're looking at a community over a 10 to 20 year horizon. And most comprehensive plans, or a lot of comprehensive plans, have detailed sub-area plans as part of them, or as a desire or need arises in the future, detailed sub-area plans are done and then adopted as addendums to the comprehensive plan. Okay. I would imagine that this not be dictated by the comprehensive plan, but we examine the principles, the goals, the foundation of the comprehensive plan to guide the detail here. Then when this gets adopted, it be adopted as an addendum to the comprehensive plan. So anything that takes place along this corridor, it is this corridor plan that takes precedent over the previously dated comprehensive plan. So that'll serve as a starting point, but this is a level of effort the comprehensive plan could not get into. So this will take precedent as an addendum to the comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you.
I think most of my concerns we've talked about. I think just consistency. I had an opportunity this past fall to travel out of town, play golf actually in Hilton Head. And if anybody's been on Hilton Head Island, you're talking about planning an area for commercial development. It's something to see. The buildings are in many instances similar, but with subtle differences that as you go by you may not notice it until you're there a couple of days and see what those differences are. But even the fast food chains and some of the bigger stores have bought into the consistency in the look for the corridor. And again, after a few days, we were able to point out all the stores where we wanted to go, and we were just visitors there. So I think just consistency. How do you get, or is there a way of getting or planning or trying to get everybody to buy into a store that has an identity, a style building, and say, but this is what we'd really like to see for our corridor, and can you, so let's say, like, I'm just going to say Kmart for an example, and that's a bad one to use. Shell gas station, they have a certain look. Is there a way of getting someone to buy into maybe a little subtle change, something that will fit more in so it doesn't just stand out, like an eyesore, if you want to call it that. And I'm not saying Shell is, I'm just saying something that would blend in with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's a good point, and the answer is yes, there are ways to do that. One of the things that we're going to be proposing in the land use and development core chapter of this are design and development guidelines. We typically don't view design development guidelines as a way to dictate the architecture of buildings, but to put into place suggestions or recommendations as a thing that they can do so that there's a consistent high quality of development in the corridor with regard to signage or landscaping or building orientation or drive-through orientation or whatever. So we don't want to dictate the way things have to be. We want independent developers or property owners and business owners to be able to design things that work for them. But we can put in place a set of guidelines that say pretty clearly, both through photography and other things, these are the types of things we would like to see achieved with text to go along with it. And if we can go back to what Jamie said, if we can put into place a development review process that is more streamlined, allows more flexibility and creativity for the applicants and property owners coming in, it's a position for them, the village, to say, listen, you know, we'll flex on this, we'll give on this, but can you do a little bit more with regard to this? And so it puts into place to some development guidelines, if you will. They're not regulatory, they're guidelines. But in the review and approval process for a large development, you then can say, how does your proposed development meet the guidelines we're trying to achieve? And it can be taken into consideration as part of the review process. We do that all the time. We try to dovetail the process with some guidelines, with the zoning, and try to get it all working together, not to lay down a strict mandate as to what it has to look like, but you start to get a theme that appears over time where there's a cohesiveness to the corridor, even though everything doesn't look the same. And so we're gonna be taking a shot at that. And depending on the community, it can either be fairly strict or not strict. It depends. The places that are typically tourist destination type places typically have a much stricter, narrower breadth of what the design can be. Places that aren't that type of destination tend to have a broader sense of design. So you focus on the things that everybody can agree on to get a baseline of high quality design. But we'll be taking a look at exactly that. Aaron?
All minor.
All right, we'll go around one more. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to go back to what the mayor had said about what he sees everywhere. What I see everywhere, George mentioned, I know that we all have, and so does our audience. The standards are not the same. And it's truly unfair when one community is treated differently than another. And that we're expected to do something above what other communities are obligated to do according to IDOT. So knowing that when we interviewed you, knowing that you have experience with IDOT, and I had hoped that there were possible negotiations that you may have with IDOT, that you might be able to straighten this out so that we are dealt with fairly, and the people here and our other businesses that are not represented today can have a chance at saving their business, improving their business, enjoying their business in every way possible, especially staying alive in their business. So I have my hope in you, and I want you to just to tell, maybe elaborate a little bit on how you do that.
Sure. Yeah, we have some engineering sub-consultants who are the ones that were able to get a hold of people at IDOT to get the CAD drawings of the latest and greatest that the village didn't even have. Make no mistakes about it. I often go into communities and say, you know, we don't have a dog in this fight. So we are a third-party perspective. We are your advocate with this. We are your gunslinger. We are the people who are looking out for you and trying to leverage everything we have to your advantage, not IDOT's. We work with IDOT. It's hard to do community planning in Illinois and not work with IDOT. We work with IDOT on most every job. Sometimes nothing is changing, so it's pretty easy to work with them. Sometimes they're proposing some pretty draconian things, and we got to see where we can give and take. There are standards in place from an engineering perspective that they say are absolute. Sometimes they are, oftentimes they are not. You have to have someone who is able to talk the engineering language, that has IDOT experience, to sometimes showcase to them, boy, if we did it this way, it might be, you know, a little bit more complicated on the front end, but it'll work well for this situation, even though it's not exactly an IDOT typical standard. So we have to bring those to light. We will understand where those priorities lie by talking to the business and the property owners, as well as you, and bringing their concerns as well as our expertise to IDOT as we sit down with them to talk about where we can move the bar on here. So you're exactly right. We're your advocate. You're the ones we're fighting for in this, and we will push IDOT as hard as we possibly can to be flexible on the things to the advantage of the village. That's our objective, and then we know that's what we're going to do.
Can I ask another little question related? How successful have you been in some situations that I have just described?
Wildly successful.
Huh?
No, we work with IDOT all the time, and I don't know, and again, it's not often where you have, or it's not as common where you have a major arterial being configured all the way through a community. It doesn't happen a lot. It happens selectively here or there. We work with a lot of those. The last big push that we had, I think, with the firm, we did Main Street through Bloomington Normal. And it goes to real wide open areas from the highway all the way down into the downtown, treated in different places at different locations. We worked on a county steering committee where IDOT representatives were at the table. We pushed hard on all those things. Geneva Commons, the big development out on Randall Road. They're just the opposite as here. They really wanted landscape medians on Randall Road, and IDOT didn't want to put them in. And they've sort of come full circle. And we really work with IDOT to get landscape medians in front of Geneva Commons. And IDOT's, and again, this, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but there's sort of three different things that a lot of state agencies look at, especially IDOT when you're looking at doing something. They won't pay to install it, like landscape medians. They won't pay to maintain it, and it cannot interfere with traffic operations. So if you're a community that wants medians, a lot of communities want medians, and IDOT says no. So we have a situation where IDOT seems to be pushing medians, and a lot of communities like, well, maybe not everything you're proposing. So those are three things IDOT continually looks at. But IDOT, in my perspective, has come really full circle in about a decade to where before they would almost not consider landscape medians to developing guidelines as to how to use them. So they've gone from no to maybe to, well, I think we can do it, to here's some standards on how to do it. So there's a lot more maneuverability than you might think. And our experience has been, my personal experience over the last 12 years or so, is IDOT used to be a lot more difficult to work with. They are now much more amenable in their design. There's still engineering standards that have to be met on some things. But IDOT has embraced the notion of complete streets. Okay? Complete streets is something that is being adopted officially across the country by DOTs. And complete streets is the notion that whenever a street goes in, whether it's a local street, an arterial street, or whatever, a highway, that it has to accommodate almost equally pedestrians, bicycles, and automobiles. Things cannot just be blindly designed to move as much traffic as possible. Because communities that are stuck retroactively years later trying to accommodate these other things is very difficult to do. So IDOT has officially adopted sort of this notion of complete streets. And that is designing corridors, even arterial corridors, with a much more comprehensive design approach than just let's blast traffic through. Which has opened up the window in the last decade to the notion of landscape medians, pedestrian mobility, adjacent or crossing bicycle paths, when 12 years ago they wouldn't even have thought of these things. So
when you just said blasting traffic through an area, that is exactly what we don't want.
Exactly.
We want people to be able to come shop in Homer Glen, have a nice entryway as you come into Homer Glen, a nice exit as you go out either to the highway or to Orland Park. The concept of blasting through,
I agree.
we don't want.
And my experience has been that IDOT has gotten much, much, much better at this, even officially starting adopting the notion of complete streets, which goes to these other means of transportation. It's why I said corridors are a unique challenge in planning. Some firms don't do it or don't do it well. And it's because there are two functions that have to be met. One is the regional need to move traffic. That's why IDOT exists. That's why IDOT exists. The other one is to make sure that the municipal needs are met. Sense of place, character, economic development, local market, pedestrian mobility, all these other things. They're not mutually exclusive. You don't have to have one over the other. You can have both. It's a design challenge, and we'll push where we can. But we've been very successful whenever we worked with IDOT.
When IDOT was here before and the business owners were here and they were asking for either shorter mediums or a non-mountable median so they could get from A to B. And all of us trustees too said the same thing. That's not what we're looking for. They said that's what you're going to get. Their object was to direct the traffic from 355 into Orland, which we have so many businesses here that are on 159th that have been in business for so many years, and they've given their life, blood, sweat, and tears for it. And then you're gonna drive right past them? Because people don't wanna turn around. They don't wanna make a U-turn. That's what they kept insisting. It's real simple to make a U-turn. It's not simple to make a U-turn. You know, what this village is honestly looking for is for a corridor that's simple for people to navigate. We don't need 30-foot medians. We don't need 3 or 4 miles of cement. You know, the whole idea that if they did what we asked them to do would save millions of dollars. And it would save us a giant headache because we don't have to worry about changing the cement 10 years after it cracks up, replacing all the vegetation, watering all the vegetation, and killing our businesses and not wanting anyone to come here. You know, like I said, when I went up by Route 30 and I looked, they do have some unmountable areas, but they have a lot of open areas. But where they had an unmountable, they made sure they went from street to street to where they had no openings on Route 30. Well, then it's not a big deal because no one can turn in there anyhow. They have to turn in where the streets are. So we have the power to be able to, any big thing that's coming before us in the future, we can set it up that way. But right now, if they do it the way they want to, they're going to kill all these businesses.
And you see something very good. There's a difference between planning for a development that's going to happen down the road, no pun intended, once the road has been designed. You can accommodate those, but the impact of existing businesses that rely on those lefts to get in. And that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about, is the fact of the matter of if you have to do a U-turn or take a left across crazy traffic, and if a median's there, you can't take that left, then you're either going to go past it, or a certain number of people are just going to go past it and not try to make that move to go in. There's a convenience to turning right in, right out. That's why you see gas stations on different corners. That's why you see a Walgreens on one side of the street, a CVS on the other side of the street. I am going to work in the morning. I can zip in, take a right, get what I need to do, take a right out, or I hit the other one on the other side of the street on the way home, right in and right out. But lefts are a different story, and medians make it even possible to do a left. So we don't know all the history yet of what's transpired and what IDOT has said, so we're starting here, pushing hard for what we can do for the village. But local access, the mayor said, direct access to local property and local businesses is a big issue. And medians can look nice, but they have an impact. They have a direct impact on properties.
See, it goes back to this whole thing that I'm trying to establish here, that I can't get my hands around. But they've been down there, they've talked to us, and we still don't know the latitude of design that we can come up with to make the village viable, make the business owners, property owners happy, because we've been told it doesn't exist. But my eyes tell me it does exist.
When was the last time you had a working session with IDOT over the design?
Aaron, do you remember the date?
It's been a while.
It's been a while because one of the things that sort of transpired here, we went up there, met with them. I took some of the business folks there. They told us the way it's going to be. They came down here, told us the way it's going to be. They had public meetings where they had their maps out and told us the way it's going to be. They made some minor changes from quarter-mile breaks to a few eighth-mile breaks. But that's about the latitude that we've been given so far in this whole decision-making process. Now, they are going to pay for the project, so they are going to have, the larger leg in the whole thing. But as a community, you don't want to destroy the character of a community by getting something forced down your throat. And like I said, I'm not positive. That's why we hired you and professionals to handle this, so that we can find out exactly what is the latitude of what we're working with. Then we can put together a plan. But if everything is going to be no, it's like this,
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm convinced the more and more we do this, that it's more art than science, or shall I say more art than engineering. Most things can be engineered. Sometimes it's simply easier to say, these are our standards, we cannot deviate. It removes the discussion.
Well, that's what's pretty much transpired here.
And what we need to do is find the chinks in the armor where we can take a run at it and say, is this a variable? Is this something we can move? Is this something we can change? Okay. Here's why, based on our professional opinion and our engineers, why this would be a viable alternative. And if we can bring that to life, then we can position ourselves to get some of that stuff done. That's what we're hoping to achieve.
Good.
Well, next thing is timing. you know, the farther IDOT goes with their planning and their final design and review, they're gonna say it's too late.
That's exactly
So
why
I think it's gonna be real important to jump on this really quick and see how much we can get.
I agree
you know,
100%.
What we could do.
I agree, yeah, we're not pausing to breathe on this. We're hitting the ground running, and we're meeting with them as soon as we possibly can. All right, does anybody else have any other issues they want to throw up here real quick? All right, what I want you to do next then is focus on question number 2. So we've got several different things written down up here, or you can just go off your head, off your memory. But for question number 2, I want you to write down the 3 most important things that you've heard discussed so far in order of importance. We've heard a whole bunch of things thrown out there, and everything we've heard is important. But I want to get a sense of what you think is most important, so write down the 3 most important things we've talked about so far in order of importance. All right, we're gonna go around the room, we'll go in reverse order. I just want you to, we're not gonna write these down, we'll collect them when we collect your papers. I just want everybody in the room to be able to hear. But when we get to you, just say, boy, my top 3 are this, this, and this. And I just want you to just list off what your top 3 issues are that we've heard so far. So we'll start doing there.
The top 3 are character of the corridor, IDOT access issues, and maximizing the economic benefit of the corridor.
Access, character, and the overall look, landscaping, you know, in and out.
Very good.
Actually, I put down median removal. Pedestrian safety, adequate bike and walking paths, and interrelated aspects of the corridor.
Very good.
Good traffic and speed control, character, and access to the properties.
Okay.
I think that timing thing that was just brought up is related to a lot of the ideas that were brought up here, and I put it first because it's right now.
Yeah.
and then maximizing the long-term strategic future benefits that we have, and character is going to play into that.
Okay, very good. Mayor?
Latitude of the rules, basically access, what are the rules to the game, the median and the speed.
Okay, very good. Have they said what the speed will be here in most of the?
No, it really wasn't, really wasn't addressed. I know there's differing opinions. I've heard different things said by trustees that we can dictate the speed limit. I don't think that that's true, but I don't know. This has been a very closed process from their point of view. I mean,
we'll try to change this.
Good.
Cam?
Access to properties, maximizing the economic benefit of the corridor, and then 2 kind of tied for 3. 1 is creating non-motorized transportation opportunities, which we hear a lot from people on both sides of the street. So the subdivisions that are along the street, their children and everybody have access to our other Heroes Trail systems in the community, so we're not so cut off as a community, one section to another. And then lighting, I think, is important too, but I have a different bend. Trustee Sabo, I want to really establish the area as a commercial corridor, so I think actually lighting is important in terms of visibility. And also, the mayor and I have been out speaking a couple places. I know the very first thing they brought up at Marion Village when the mayor was out talking was lighting. The street was too dark, and for safety purposes, they wanted more lighting. So those are my 3.5.
That's the reason why I brought up Deer Park if you're ever up there. I mean, this is a lifestyle center. When you're walking around or driving on the side, it's really lit up. But if you're behind an adjacent property or a little bit away from it, you're looking back at it, you look above it, there's no like glow in the sky. So That's a good example of a pretty well-lit commercial area that doesn't illuminate the sky more than it should. Trustee Sample?
I would say, know the standard from IDOT and the ability to negotiate. 2, existing businesses planning for their survival and long-term business planning. And 3, the character of the corridor. And I really don't disagree with our manager. I'm really for safety, but use the light when you need, where you need it, and use as much as you need.
Minor mediums, keeping it business friendly, because they're gonna put them out of business if they do it. And as the mayor said before, speed limit wise, I think it was up to IDOT, it'd be 65. So let's just get them through here, let's get them into Orland. Second would be landscaping, because either way, if you use cement, it's a cost, and if you use plantings, it's a cost. And then lighting, as Trustee Sable said, you need it for safety, but you can still keep a dark sky.
You bet.
First one would be a working dialogue and an understanding with IDOT, highlighting the emphasis of our current businesses that are in Homer Glen with an eye on our future businesses. I think we need to highlight our belief system as well with IDOT. The other one is regulatory aspects of Homer Glen currently and as we're looking down into the future. And with this in mind, maximizing our economic development benefits.
I think one of the things, our approach to planning, I think one of the reasons we've been as successful as we have in the short time we've been around as a firm, is we don't approach planning in a theoretical or conceptual frame of mind. You know, my name is on the door of my business. I'm very entrepreneurial minded as is my business partner. So we sort of approach everything from the entrepreneurial perspective. The person, the family, the woman, the guy who owns a piece of property or business and is trying to do everything to make it a go, because we know how tough it is. And we know that in our minds is sort of the engine that drives almost everything. And so we approach planning, even from a design perspective, as making sure we do what we can to make sure that piece is viable and works. So it's, to us, it's not theory, it's sort of what we hold as most important. All right, so it's a pretty good list. I think the 3 that really jump into my mind when I look at the corridor is a couple of different ones. They dovetail together, but keeping this as an economic engine for the community, I think that's key. I think the direct access and the access issue for properties and the character of the corridor and the adjacent areas over time. And I think almost everything that was said is going to dovetail and fall into those 3 in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's the lighting or the landscaping regarding the aesthetics or the medians with regard to property access, giving it a sense of place. But I really think those 3 things, I think, Aaron, those are the 3 that you mentioned right off the bat, really seem to capture the heart and soul of a lot of what was said. The next issue I want to focus on is question number 3. And we've identified issues, we've identified concerns, we've identified things that we think are problematic. The next question is a little bit more difficult. And this says, and I gotta tell you, usually when I do this with communities, I say, okay, let's say tomorrow you're in charge. And you can say, okay, I'm in charge, so I'm gonna do these 3 things. Be specific. What 3 things would you do? That's what I usually say when I'm talking to a community. Well, I'm talking to the people who are in charge. So it's not just a theoretical question. You're in charge of the village, you're calling the shot. And you can say, you know, we should do, if I had my way, I would focus on doing 3 things that are most important. And I don't want, like, do something about safety. Do what? I want to be specific. So if you could specifically say, these are 3 specific things we should do, what should they be? You know, improve the character of the corridor. That's not specific. That's pretty general. There's a lot of things you can do with regard to that. But as specifically as you can think, if you had to say, listen, these are the 3 most important things, we roll out of bed tomorrow and wake up, these are the 3 things we ought to do or start doing. What are those 3 things? So take a few minutes and jot down the question number 3, what you think are the 3 most specific projects, the 3 most important actions that the village needs to undertake. And again, be as specific as you think you can be. if it was 30 degrees colder right now, we'd have a foot of snow outside.
Can you turn this down?
It's been raining like
I
crazy.
opened the door. We're talking too much. Joe, can you turn, it's really hotter in here than you think.
Turn it on.
It really is. Yeah, I know you like it.
That's great.
Thanks, Joe. There you go. One person to go.
And who's owned a business on the corridor longer than anybody else? 10 years? Business on the corridor, anybody own a business on the corridor for 10 years? Yeah.
35 years.
35 years.
25.
25?
It's 33.
33?
John, we're gonna leave a very simple
Sign-in sheet?
sign-in sheet over here as they leave, because I know you want to stay in contact with all of them. So for their name and either their email or their address, if for some reason you don't have an email, which I'm sure most people do. So when you leave, if you want to be notified of the business meeting, this would be a good list to put your name on,
Great
okay?
idea. All right, I think most of you have your 3 projects written down, so we're gonna go around and do the same thing. And when we get here, we're gonna talk about the 3 projects that you would undertake. And so we're gonna change things up a little bit just to throw you off, and Janie will start with you. So if you could do 3 things tomorrow, or starting tomorrow, what do you think are the 3 most important things to start doing?
Well, I've got 4, but we're doing one of them right now, which is plan strategically.
Okay.
We got to start with the planning, because that's the foundation for everything. But I think annexations, undergrounding utilities, and installing infrastructure that's not there.
Very good.
You got to make sites development ready, but that's going to be something that takes time.
That's a very good point. You talked before about having the process in place to accommodate development when it begins to materialize and be proposed or be considered. Having sites that are development ready with infrastructure and everything else is crucial to be marketable and competitive in the price, when you're starting to select sites. That's crucial. That's very good. Mayor?
Well, it's pretty similar. I would put together a schedule with IDOT for meetings right away. You know, call them to the table. We need to talk about some issues, and that's that. Annexation of the properties, we are working on that right now. We made an annexation, I think, 2 meetings ago. I know we're talking with some of the property owners now. And then the sewer and water expansion.
Yep.
I mean, when you're putting a road like this in place, and the state is putting that type of dollars in, we need to have utilities. We need to have these properties serviced so that they can develop. Otherwise,
Exactly right.
otherwise we got farms next to a $100 million road that don't create any sales tax for the village,
Yep.
and that's what's going to run the engine to keep us out of a property tax.
Exactly right. Cam?
We could all probably write down 10, but I tried to write down 3 that maybe no one else would mention. But one of the ones that we need to do is we need to do what we're doing on the 143rd Street project now that the county's doing, and that's communicating with businesses. And of course, you'll be doing that as part of the project here, this study project. And then when the actual construction project is happening, we'll be doing what Janie and Mike have been doing in terms of visiting businesses. We have on our website weekly updates on 143rd Street project, so we'll be doing the same thing for 159th. So I think that's really important with the existing businesses. As part of this plan, one of the most important things I think that will come out of it will be in this document that will ultimately be created will be a solid advice to the village board about the development realities of parcels along 159th Street. Okay, not every parcel is target worthy. Some parcels have limited reuse. Some have amazing potentials because of their size and their locations. Corner lots are great, middle lots maybe there'll be some development realities that you'll be able to communicate with the board, so everybody kind of is on the same page going forward on that. And then finally, I think obviously one of the most important things we can do is something we have direct control over, and that's completion of the public improvements that are under our purview. If we were, in my opinion, just my opinion, if we were to complete this project and there not be non-motorized transportation on both sides of the street, or available for the next 100 years, that would be a crime. I really think that it's one of the great ways we can connect the community through our Heroes Trail path system. So, and the lighting and any upgrades that we might be able to do, since it's a main entrance to our community. So those are my three.
That's good, and I'm glad you brought up the thing about sort of the development viability being different at different parcels and different locations along the corridor. There's only so much market for commercial. It used to be, it seemed like for 100 years, wherever there was an arterial or a collector road, municipalities or planners just took a red marker and striped both sides, quote unquote, commercial. And that's what it was going to be. And you can drive throughout the region and see areas of commercial that never had the viability to begin with. In Chicago, there's 470 some odd miles of linear arterial roadway. And there's probably market viability that's designated for commercial. There's probably market viability for about 220 linear miles of commercial. So what do you do with the other areas that have historically for 100 years thought it was being commercial linear frontage, and there just isn't market for that? So where do you focus your commercial? What type of commercial do you focus where? What do you do with the pieces that are deemed to be less viable but still want a return on investment for the person who owns the property? It's not as simple as just saying, it's a commercial corridor, stripe it red and move on. It's different in every single section of the way. So
right.
Your point on that is very well made.
Well, it's going to be the only corridor in town that's had over $100 million investment in it. So the viability of each parcel is very important. We have to make, on that particular street, we have to make the best use of every square foot.
Exactly right. Well stated.
Okay. First one is, you said to be specific, and I can't be any more specific in this one than I have. But create the feeling that you have arrived in Homer Glen, so that we're different than the other communities. We don't look like Lockport, we're not going to look like Orland Park or Tinley or wherever 159th Street is. And then access to existing properties and future businesses, a way to know how that's going to be done. And then the third one, I kind of combined things, but the plan of the architecture for cohesiveness. And so it's not ticky-tacky, sticky-sucky, however, whatever those terms are. But you know that there's a real good look. The traffic flow and specific guidelines for the goals that we establish. So that's it.
And I think when we go back to sort of like, you mentioned the architecture, not just sort of, first of all, having a sense of place and knowing where you are, identity as you drive through the area, to me that's crucial. I don't know how many times you drive through the region and say, what town is this? This is kind of nice. I mean, Cam said you've got a huge investment here. Let people know where you are. But with regard to architecture, I'm always, and again, it goes back to our notion of taking things out of the theoretical into the practical. We worked in a community that had guidelines that required a prairie style of architecture. And this was the town that had no history of prairie or heritage of prairie. Somebody at some point liked it and thought the district ought to all be whatever. Well, Jewel came in for a huge shopping center with a bunch of outlots. And this is probably an 85,000 square foot Jewel. And they really struggled with how to make a building that big look prairie. And they came up with several designs and it just looked weird. And they said, and finally their architect said, listen, we're bending over backwards to try to do what you keep saying you want done, but just for the fun of it, we had our design team propose what we thought would be just a phenomenal looking center. It's nothing to do with prairie architecture, but the architecture is great, the roof lines are great, the building materials are phenomenal. We think you'll love it, but it doesn't meet this mandate for prairie. So they unraveled it and they said, oh, that's beautiful. And they're like, but we can't do it for what you're dictating. So through the course of this one development, we finally got the village to realize that you had to be careful about dictating architecture and thinking how to do it in different locations. I lived in Arizona for a while where they dictated the shade of pale white of the building and the deviation of pink for the roof tiles. That's pretty strict. So we have to make sure there's a high quality look and a look that is Homer Glen and a look that says this is this fantastic regional destination on 159th Street in Homer Glen without dictating something that seems arbitrary or contrived. So
Right,
it's
right.
a real balancing act.
Yeah, I wasn't specific,
Oh, yeah.
but because I said architectural cohesiveness, because I know that there's lots of styles or a variety of themes that could fit together.
Yeah, and I think to do exactly what you said is important, maximizing flexibility for property owners or businesses to do something that fits the quality look, but gives them maximum design flexibility. And I think you're exactly, and I think you stated it well, we talked about going on vacation, and seeing a place that just looks good because there's something about it that tied an aesthetic together of the whole place, and you begin to notice over time it's been really nice. So.
I would make 159th Street a place that almost every business would want to come into. Make it a downtown. Don't make it look strictly business. You want to make it look friendly, comfortable, almost like an old town look, because really we are the only rural village around here. We have more open space than anybody else does it. We have a good shot at making it the way we want it to look. You know, if you could do it that way, and you could bring some of the stores that, you know, Northside has all the stores that, at least I know my wife, she goes always up north to hit Schaumburg and Oak Brook. We have nothing down here. We have an opportunity to bring all that down here, and we can draw from all the villages and towns that are around us rather than driving 50 miles north. They can come right here. We have an opportunity that is just unbelievable right now. But you want it to where everyone wants to come here instead of going there.
Yeah. You make a good point, and I stressed in this, one of the things we take a hard look at is market. We don't want to recommend a development or a use for the corridor that has no viability. It's never going to happen. So we're, you know, what do you get when you drive 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles? And what type of dollars are leaving Homer Glen to go to those areas? Or what type of areas are leaving the surrounding region to go to those areas that could be captured here for those uses if they were ever located here? So it's sort of a drive time analysis or a gap analysis. That's some of the stuff we want to do. So we have a better idea as to how to position the corridor for the types of uses we think are most viable that you want. So you're exactly right.
First, and I know it's been said a couple times, but working with IDOT, let's get an understanding, let's have open, honest dialogue with IDOT. Next would be plan and prepare for the growth, from our infrastructure to planning and zoning. The other is, well, it all goes hand in hand, but a corridor that attracts investments, generates economics, but also an activity for the community.
That's a good point. That's a real good point. The activity thing is a good point. Everything might not be able to be retail, or everything might not be able to be economic, but things that are non-tax generating or non-retail generating can be synergistic or catalytic to people coming to the area for other activities that would benefit the businesses that are there. So that's a real good point.
I was thinking more of a movie theater.
That's what I mean. It gets people to the area.
Well, that's sales generating.
But the notion of a downtown is, one of the things that makes a downtown successful is the downtown itself is the destination. You know, honey, what do you want to do tonight? Oh, let's go downtown. Yeah, maybe we'll grab a show and afterwards we'll go eat somewhere. You might not know what show, you might not know where you're going to go eat. And if you walk around the sidewalk to do window shopping, you don't know what item you're going to buy or what store you're going to buy from. The downtown is the destination. And there's a level of success that's achieved when you've gotten that level of destination or draw. Corridors can be that as well. Where do you want to go? Let's drive down to 159th Street. Maybe we'll go here, maybe we'll go there. We'll see what's going on. It becomes greater than the sum of its parts, and that's sort of what you're talking about.
And also, I'd like to add this to this topic. We have the benefit of being pretty close and down the road from a state-of-the-art hospital, new hospital too. And we need to be aware of that and tap into that resource with people coming into the
That's a real good point.
into the district or whatever you want to call it.
That's a real good point.
So we need to draw them to Homer Glen versus out.
And I think the notion that you talked about with regard to something that could be a big draw, like a movie theater or something else, or building off of other employment centers like the hospital or other things, goes back exactly what Cam brought up, and that is the different types of uses of development for the different areas that may be totally different, but work all in harmony for the corridor as a whole. That's going to be crucial doing this, because some sites are just going to be conducive to accommodating something and other sites just simply cannot do. I think
Such
that's-
as professional centers, is
Yep.
what you're alluding to.
Exactly right.
One other thing, John, that wasn't brought up, but Homer Glen is very rich and is forest preserve. I don't know if the forest preserve can be incorporated in some type of thinking, but the forest preserve property is annexed into Homer Glen.
That's right.
The forest preserve does have frontage on 159th Street. There may be a way to work with the county also to, when you look at an overall view of something, how do you maximize the use of the forest preserve when it happens to be right on your corridor?
Good point.
You know?
All right, the last thing I want you to focus on is question number 4, and it's easy.
I think we missed these guys. Did we miss these
Oh,
guys?
I'm sorry, we didn't go around. Look at that. See, I'm so used to my pattern, I didn't go around. Aaron,
Sure,
you're next.
just ignore us.
You kind of talked about this, the first one, the economic analysis of our current businesses and the demographics of the village and that kind of data. The second one would be to create a set of flexible design guidelines for architecture and signage. And then the third action would be the meeting with the property and business owners.
Very good.
I'm the biggest offender, but we have to talk to the microphones.
Okay.
So I'll try to do better with you guys.
Okay, well, I think after tonight, you're going to have a pretty good idea what the board and our department heads and managers' ideas are. So I think tomorrow, as you said, what we would do tomorrow, the thing I would do would be to get with our landowners, our businesses and residents, and see what their concerns and their questions and their fears are. I mean, they've looked at what IDOT is presenting as a corridor, as 159th is. Knowing what their real concerns are and the challenges they're going to meet, that they're going to have to try to meet, now you have some ammunition to go back to IDOT with.
Yep.
The second thing that I would do is say, look, we've talked to all the elected officials, to the staff, the residents, the business owners, and landowners. We have a real big issue, for example, with the median, the width of the road. I mean, they're talking about taking the median width is going to be roughly the size, the width of 159th Street right now. It's going to be, I think they brought it down from 28 to 24 feet.
No, I think it was like 32 to 28.
Okay, so wow, they gave us 4 feet. So I think that would be the second thing. Go with them and see how much, as the mayor said, how much latitude we have, or say, you know what, get rid of the medians, this is what we want to do, and let's start there. And then the third thing is actually the design, what our look wants to be, and specifically how we're going to, I would like to see us start, or I would start with existing buildings. If you work in an end where you have nothing and try to work to them, I think it might be a little bit more difficult rather than to start with our existing businesses and say, okay, this is what we have here, how can we build off of this to make them look good, and everything around them just attract each other.
Very good. Very
That's
good.
it.
Mine aren't really that different from others. I think that, we need immediately to start working with IDOT, because I do think the timeline, we're running out of time. And that scares me. I think that sewer and water, the infrastructure, it just has to be there. We have to be ready, when development starts to come here. But I'd also like to see a review maybe of our ordinances, and are they truly business-friendly? That may be an issue, and I'd like somebody to take a look at that.
Yeah, that's why we thought it was really important when the RFP was crafted by the village, that someone had the insight to require that an analysis of existing zoning be done as part of this in case changes had to be made to dovetail with the intentions of the village. I thought that was pretty insightful.
I think basically everybody's kind of hit on my topics. I think one thing too you got to look at immediately is just working with the current business owners and how it's going to affect them during the construction process. I mean, from the beginning to the end. From my past experience, I've seen how it impacts businesses. Unfortunately, lose some of them, but how that's all going to go down and impact them.
Very good. All right, we started with you, Jenny, correct? All right. What I want you to do next is to focus on question number 4, and it's easy when we meet to start a project just to get some ideas flowing for people to focus on issues or concerns or problems or wants. But I think it's important to identify what is most important or what the best things are that you have, because if you don't, you can run the risk of losing that. An example that I give a lot is the notion of like the federal urban renewal programs from 40 years ago. They sort of went across the United States and they went to a lot of these small downtowns and they said, we're going to try to modernize these small downtowns and make them economically viable and really energize them. And some of what happened in some towns was those old detailed facades that were hard to maintain, they They put driving facades over them. They thought there might be too many streets, so they closed a couple of them off and made them pedestrian arcades. They took out some of the older buildings and put in surface parking lots to accommodate more people driving there. And they did these things to make the downtowns more successful. And now a lot of towns across the country are trying desperately to undo all of that, because what they did in their desire to make it more successful is they took away what those communities thought was most important: the character, the architecture, the sense of place, the quality of life, the fact that it was a destination people wanted to go to it. And they did all these things to make it more successful, and they took away what was most valued. So it's important when you start a project to say, listen, this is what is most important to us as we start this. Our local businesses, the character of our community, creating a sense of destination. But what are the things that you have now that are most important? What are the things that are the corridors or the village's greatest assets, its greatest strengths? Because these are the things we have to build on going forward. And as we identify other things we might want to change, we need to do so keeping in mind the things that we don't want to change or that we don't want to risk ruining, because that's what makes Homer Glen unique. So for question 4, take a few minutes and write down those things that you think are the village's and the corridor's greatest assets, its greatest strengths, its greatest advantages, because those are the things we want to build on going forward. And we might not if we don't identify them. So take a few minutes and answer that for question number 4. Everybody get to sign up who wanted to? Oh. All right, a couple of you are still jotting things, but we'll start right over here. Let me hear some of the things that you wrote down, the best things about the village and the corridor.
Well, some of the strengths that we have for the corridor, I believe, of course, you can't be remiss not to mention 355 bringing flow of traffic to 159th Street. But right now, I think one of the strengths is we do have a fairly clean canvas to work on. We definitely have strong intrinsic values in Homer Glen. We could build upon. We have, as the mayor alluded to, we have forest preserve. We have frontage on 159th as well. But I think those are positives that we could take advantage of as an asset.
Very good.
More open space than any other community surrounding us right now. As Trustee Kajania said, we have I-355 and brand new 159th Street. We have no clutter. We're nothing like Orland Park, where you sit through 15 lights to get through. Plus, we're a very rural area that people like to come and not feel hustle and bustle.
Very good.
God bless. I would say that the character of the community, and that might mean something different to many people. It's also the undeveloped land. It's also the natural resources. And other towns are doing this. We hear of lifestyle shopping centers and so forth. I think we can even do better than that by working development with the environment. Those two together would make it attractive and people friendly. So that, why does Oak Brook enjoy such success? Because people can walk around there. It's very beautiful. Why is it that strip malls are only places to park and go in? And you never see anybody enjoying being outside. So if it encourages people to be there, it also encourages shopping. It also means there's more spending, and that the business then can enjoy the fruits of their labor.
Sounds good.
So
We did, it's interesting, some numbers. We did the commercial revitalization plan for Oak Brook. And it won the Chamber's top award. And it's interesting to have a Chamber of Commerce where the CEO of McDonald's is on the Chamber, and things like that. It's interesting because it's the mom and pops and the big corporations. The daytime population there is over 100,000, and there's only about 8,000 people that live there. So daily you have an influx of 90 some odd thousand people who live there or shop there or down there or work at offices there. And they've really done a good job over the last 30-plus years of creating a situation that captures that population. So they eat there, they shop there, they entertain there, everything else. So.
Well, and they're also competing with shopping centers like Yorktown that are enclosed. And people go in those, you know, and they don't have to deal with the environment. But Oak Brook has stood alone as a leader in that kind of shopping center. I'm glad that you've worked there. I think that you understand.
We worked with General Growth in a few different places. It's the largest open-air mall in the world. And just a couple of years ago, General Growth sort of zeroed in on that and said they wanted to make it their global showcase, so that if someone in Brazil is thinking about developing a mall, General Growth could fly them to Oak Brook to show them what that mall should look like.
Wow.
So, as successful as it's been in the past, they've got a lot of plans to make it something even more than it is now, which is kind of exciting. So we'll see when the market begins to turn what happens there. But they've created an environment that's kind of unique in the region.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then it also does something that the Community and Economic Development Committee is interested in and promoting, and Ted had mentioned, is that when you have activities in an open area like that, and they have a number of really great events during their warm months, it brings in people from all over.
No question. Cam?
Well, a couple of them already have been mentioned. Obviously, we have hundreds of acres of vacant land, which a lot of communities would die to have. So, on a major commercial corridor with a $100 million investment. So, that's probably our one greatest asset. And then right behind that is location. The toll road has obviously changed a lot for 159th, and that's an asset. But number 3 is tied in with the acreage and with location. I mean, you can have thousands of acres, but if you don't have the financial demographics in a community that will support development on them, they just sit forever. So the community, by Will County standards and census data, is a comfortable community financially, and so we are exporting a lot of sales tax out of the community. Meyer will help to that to some extent, but we need to recapture more, and of course that's one of the goals of the of this project, helping us to set up a plan to capture more sales tax on 159th.
Very good.
Well, like everybody said, we've got an awful lot of open land. Last time I looked, I think there's 3,000 acres for residential development and 1,500 acres for commercial development. And it's much easier to work through a concept when nothing's there, you know. Now, at the same time that you're working through that end where it's open land, we do have businesses that will be dramatically affected by this road and how it's put together. So I don't want to lose those businesses. They're the backbone of the community. We have the opportunity to take advantage of, as it was mentioned earlier, the hospital. The hospital is a $400 million project that not every place can have it right on the next corner. There'll be tremendous opportunity with relocation of people, the medically related people, businesses that are associated with the medical profession. And then the one thing that I think is probably a really cool asset of the village is we have the semi-rural atmosphere. I mean, we're not going to be a farm community in the future. Everybody understands that. We've got 355 on our west boundary. We've got 159th Street going to be widened, but it doesn't mean you have to compromise the semi-rural atmosphere look that we have right now. So through this whole project, I think that is one of the big assets that people enjoy that move to Homer Glen, is they say, boy, is it beautiful. It's got all the forest preserve. It's got, you know, Margaret makes sure we have a lot of trees and things like that. So, you know, I think that's our big asset, is the semi-rural look.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Katie?
Just going to be kind of variations of stuff you've already heard, but I really think that Homer Glen residents have a sense of community and a sense of place, and that's a very, very strong asset to build on, and will help identify something that makes this uniquely Homer Glen as far as planning strategically goes for the future. And the idea that you know, there are these natural assets, these environmental assets that the village has already started to develop a trail system. There's ideas of trying to see that be linked up with this corridor. There's really an economic development opportunity for the village as a whole in terms of if you actually develop a trail system that becomes a regional draw. And you have people coming in, they're going to go biking in your community, and they're going to have, you know, meals and things like that, and purchase things along the way. Is an idea. Maybe there's a way to incorporate this open space and idea of nature into the design of the corridor, commercial portions even, with open space and gathering places. Hopefully designed well around retail sales tax generating opportunities, but when you create a place for people to get out of the car and congregate and socialize, that helps build that community and that destination and that feeling that people want to be there. So I think we have that opportunity. Maybe we can pull some of these things together as we're going forward. And then the location and the demographics. You know, you've heard all that before. So the fact that we're right on bordering Will County is not a disadvantage either, because there's a different taxing structure and opportunity to take advantage of that too.
Good point.
And just one other thing, I mean, the interchange opportunity may be a very special opportunity for Homer Glen in terms of, is this an area where actually jobs can be created because it's, or, you know, we can build the support for retail and service usage in our community because we have built daytime employment, people that actually stay in the community during the daytime.
Very good.
Location obviously was the number one thing, I think their biggest asset. I think too, because it's a clean slate here, we're able to overall look at today's economic needs and see the mistakes other communities have made. I think one of the biggest and best things here too is just the sense of community, but the input from the community and the working together as a board to listen to what the needs are of the community and what they want, the bike trails, different things within the parks in the community, things like that, and what they're going to want to see along this corridor as well.
Very good.
Most of this has been already stated. The available land is really key to our success. But I really do think that the tollway interchange is truly going to be our greatest success. And I know Trustee Yukich and Trustee Sabo talked about other areas of shopping. My whole focus on shopping has changed since that tollway has opened. I live on the west side of the village. I jump on that toll road and I'm at Boughton Plaza in a heartbeat. And I don't even go to Orland anymore. I don't even bother, because it just takes so much time to get across the community to get over there. I'm at Boughton Plaza in 7 minutes. All my Christmas shopping was done there. I never even went to Orland. So my whole shopping has changed because of that. And when you talk about Oak Brook, I used to shop a lot at Oak Brook, but I cannot tolerate the traffic there. It's terrible. You go there and you have to plan like ahead of time. Like tomorrow I'll get there. It's just nuts. So I don't even bother with it anymore. But I mean, I think that the toll road is truly going to be a success for us. You get off that toll road, you're in Homer Glen. So, perfect.
Yeah, the traffic is, to give you an example of the traffic there, they have 2 fire stations, one on 31st Street, way south, and one on 22nd Street, right by Old Orchard. Takes less time for the fire truck on 31st Street to get there.
I love shopping at Oak Brook, but I can't find a place to park, and I can't get there, so it doesn't matter. But those are
deterrents.
Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, other people have touched on what I'm going to say, and I think basically we're starting from ground zero. You know, we do have land to develop. You know, we're not trying to change our total look, trying to attract something different from what we had that didn't work or how times change. So, and we do have a lot of businesses here that have been anchors to this community. You see, there's just a few businesses here from 30, 35 plus years. You know, the businesses come here and they want to stay. And as long as they can, you know, make a good living for their family and you know, give the community something, they're going to stay. So I think, you know, starting to just mold it from the beginning is a big advantage to us. We can make it kind of look how we all want it to look. Secondly, You know, we talk about I-355, and that is wonderful, and I agree with Marcia. You know, I work construction, so it was always hard to get north, but now it's easy. But also, look at our other roads. I mean, we have some unique roads in town here where, I know, as we're all coming home from work and moving around, once we get out of certain communities, like, oh, good, I'm in Will County, things slow up a little bit. But we've got north and south streets that take us to other communities that are easy to get here, and they are traveled, but they're not backed up. So you don't have to get on the main road with, as Trustee Yukich says, a traffic light every, 200 feet if you need one or not. So I think that's a big asset too. We can get people coming to our corridor, coming to our community to shop and to enjoy themselves, from north and south, east and west, from many roads that are good to travel. They're not very crowded. And it does, as the mayor said, you go into a lot of forest preserve, and people like to get away from that, the asphalt jungle, get out. They call it the country in Homer Glen. I think it's great. So
The regional access is phenomenal.
it is.
And what you drive through to get here is pretty nice.
Yeah.
And that beats a lot of traffic.
Sure does.
I think the greatest assets are the current businesses. A lot of people have already said this, but we have a lot of large undeveloped parcels, and it's their size, and then they have a lot of frontage, which makes them, better to develop. And then the access ramp on 355.
Very good. I think it's interesting.
Hey, John, just one other thing that nobody mentioned that it plays in a big way sometime in the future is the future high school property is in Homer Glen. And that's about 128 acres, 125 acres. So as you're contemplating, what needs we have on 159th Street, at some point in time, you're going to have, a school of probably 2,500
Pretty
kids.
nice campus, yeah, exactly where that's going to be. I think it's interesting that, you hear the expression that it's important for a community to be attractive to business. And the most important business to be attractive to are the businesses you already have. And sometimes communities forget that, because they're too busy trying to get what they don't have. All right, so that's the questions we wanted to take you through this evening. I think going forward, we're going to, a couple things, we'll work with Janie and Cam to set up when we will have the first community workshop for businesses and property owners and residents. It hasn't been scheduled yet. We'll make sure that we get that scheduled as soon as we possibly can. It will likely be an evening workshop as well, and anybody who's on that list will make sure to notify you, as well as other means of getting the word out. We'll reach out to IDOT and start planning to meet with them as soon as we possibly can. We'll meet with them on our own so we can do what we need to do, but we'll also have meetings where we can pull in key village staff as well to bring that nuance to the table when we have to as well. Are there any questions from anybody on the board before we sort of wrap things up this evening? It's just, again, we're just kicking things off, so are there any questions for me at all that I can bring back to the team or anybody else?
I think we,
I just want to say real quick, because it's a habit of you to always reference managers and administrators. I appreciate that. It's very respectful. But in this project, really, Janie and Aaron are going to be the staff liaisons.
Very good.
And I know, we've met with Aaron too, but for the board, because the board has seen my correspondence about this, and I always mention Aaron and Janie, they're really going to be the two staff people that are going to work most closely. And then, I'll be there too, but
That's perfect.
they're the ones who are going to carry the water.
It works for us.
Thank you.
So again, we'll start working with IDOT as soon as we possibly can. We will work with Janie and Aaron to set up the community workshop, the first one, and we will start to rocking and rolling as quick as we possibly can on the study. So thank you for giving up an evening to start off this project. I think it's important, and I'm pretty excited about the potential of it, so it'll be a fun project.
couple other things, John, I just thought of is you might want to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce. We have the Homer Township Chamber of Commerce, and we also have a Will County Historical Preservation, those type of agencies you might want to talk to.
Good point.
And also the fire department, if they have plans in the future for some type of location out in the west, on 150, somewhere around 159th.
That's great.
Just all those parties.
And we've got some inroads with the Forest Reserve in the county as well. Another study that we worked on with New Lenox, Lockport, Homer Glen, and a couple of the communities and the county was the I-355 Bike Trail Master Plan, which included the county and Forest Reserve in all 5 communities. So that was just a few years ago as well. So we'll put all those people to the table.
There is also a Will County Corridor Planning Group too. Yeah. Okay.
So if anybody at any point in time wants to get some information to us, or an inquiry, or a direction, or a concern, get it to Janie, and Janie will get it to us. I sort of think of that as sort of a communication protocol. It may very well be that Mike's got a great idea, and he can call me directly if he wants, but it may be something that everybody would benefit from. And if it goes through Janie and then to me and then back to Janie, it can be disseminated so everybody benefits from it, so.
Okay, are there any further questions for John or statements? All right, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
First by trustee Sabo, second by trustee Costa. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you very much.